myself again. But it's the only...
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters. Tuesday night is always Liam Kennedy's night. Good evening, mate.
You all right? How's things?
Yeah, okay, mate. Not bad. Good to see you. And as always, plenty to talk about with regards to Newcastle United. And I'm sure we'll get plenty of questions coming in about incoming transfers. People hopeful that there's players coming in, Liam. But let's start with the bad news coming out of St James's Park today, and that's Matt Ritchie's shoulder blow. It's been confirmed that he's going to have surgery on the shoulder that he damaged in Sunday's 1-1 draw at Tottenham. The injury, I think, is similar to the one that was suffered by Fabian Schär when we played Spurs back in July at Gallagher. And he had to go under the knife as well. So it's bad news for Matt Ritchie, mate.
It is. It's interesting. There's been some confusing messages with regards injuries come out of Newcastle recently, and this is one of those that we're told it's not a dislocation of the shoulder, but for around 2 months now we've been told that Fabian Schär was a dislocation of the shoulder. So I'm not quite sure exactly what it is. Mixed messages coming from Steve Bruce there, but it is a blow because a character like Matt Ritchie going to a ground like Rodney Parade and Newport tomorrow is exactly the type of player you want on the pitch. He's somebody who gives 100% no matter what he does. He's a nuisance to the opposition. Yes, he hasn't got that yard of pace to play further forward. And yes, he was actually at fault for the goal against Tottenham. But I still think he's a really valuable player in terms of a voice. He's got a cracking left foot and he can still do a really good job in the Premier League. So it is a big blow. But there are a few. There's a few injuries there. I mean, Kieran Clark, are we going to see Paul Dummett at any point? He's never kicked the ball since January. And to be honest, this team really needs somebody like that. Kieran Clark would normally come in tomorrow. And I think for me, I've said it on here before, he's a really good natural defender, ideal for games like tomorrow. And to be honest, I probably would have been close to starting him on Sunday, just gone as well if he'd been fit. Matty Longstaff, when are we going to see Matty Longstaff? I mean, it's one of these muscle injuries that they're really struggling to get to grips with. And after all the talk, all the furore over the summer about actually getting his contract signed, I think we're all looking forward to this season being one where Matty really pushes for a place in that centre of midfield, which I think has been highlighted in the first few games of the season that isn't quite good enough. It's not up to the job. It hasn't really provided Newcastle United with a solid base. It hasn't provided them with any creativity. It hasn't provided them with much at all, apart from a couple of flashes from Isaac Hayden. Absolutely nothing from John Joe Shelby for large parts, but there's nothing really new there. And I think Jeff Hendrick had his trial on Sunday. I've been calling for him to get that chance in the middle. It was a poor team performance, but he was very poor. I thought in that central position, when you really want somebody to go and take the game by the scruff of the neck, I don't think he did at all. So I think that's an area where you're really hoping someone like Matty Longstaff would be knocking on the door now of Steve Bruce to say, right, I need to play. But it's been really unfortunate he can't get in the side. Fingers crossed that isn't too long. But yeah, there's knocks and injuries elsewhere in the side that are a little bit of a concern. So early in the season. We suffered badly with injuries last season. Is it going to be another one of those? We sincerely hope not. But the early signs aren't great on the injury front. But there's enough players there. It's thinking about the game tomorrow and the game on the weekend. You play a League Two side and you play Burnley, one of the struggling sides in the Premier League, along with someone like Newcastle this season, probably one of the poorer sides in terms of a watch anyway. So you think this could be a really big week for Newcastle United. And they've got players in the forward areas for the first time who seem to be coming into a little bit of form. I thought Miguel Almiron was poor on Sunday, but take that out of the equation. He's allowed a poor game. It was a poor team performance. But Joe Linton, for me, I would say, reflecting back on that Sunday performance, we're not his biggest fans. We've been proven over time and time again. We've talked about that. Very few redeeming features in these performances of the first season. I thought he was great. I thought he was the best outfield player in a black and white. Sorry, I was going to say black and white. It was a purple in the purple shirt. He was. He seemed to thrive in that wide role, which he hadn't done when he played previously. But he was willing to take the ball. He showed a little bit of confidence, and I think it's amazing to think what a little bit of a goal here or there and a bit of confidence can do for a player, because I thought he was genuinely a player transformed. And that's the positives we're getting from this League Cup run, is that we've seen Jacob Murphy take his opportunity. He didn't when he came on Sunday. I thought he looked poor and gave the ball away. But you've seen someone like Joe Linton with the pressure off his shoulders, really come to the fore. He's poor against Blackburn, but really good against Morecambe, and hopefully more of the same tomorrow against the lower league side. Who provide a tougher challenge, but I would imagine a similar team from last week will go in there and hopefully go and score a few more goals and just take that into the weekend.
Somebody commented last night, you can tell how bad it is at Newcastle when Joe Linton's getting a vote of confidence from Newcastle fans and getting called outfield player of the match. There's no doubt the man of the match, though, was Darlow.
Yeah, it's another player that we've questioned. Fans have questioned, because I've always said it, Carl Darlow's a fantastic shot stopper. He really is. He's a really good shot stopper, and he showed that again. But what he's got in him, he's got the odd rick, he's got the odd mistake here and there. He'll just drop a clanger. He did that in the championship season, and he's likely to do it again potentially if he ends up having to play 10, 15 games. But Martin Dubravka is just around the corner, so there'll be no concerns there. But yeah, I think the one of the big positives of the early part of the season as well has been the performances of the two goalkeepers. And it's no surprise that there were question marks about who would go into the season as the number 2 behind Dubravka, and I think both have really put their hands up, and there's a bit of a battle on there. Mark Gillespie hasn't conceded a goal in these 2 games and looked very confident, fantastic distribution, really confident from crosses, vocal, and Carl Darlow's really sort of looks up for the challenge and has put in some fantastic performances in the Premier League, and you can't really fault either of them. And it'll be a difficult decision to bring Martin Dubravka back, really, if you're looking at it. But we know how good Martin Dubravka is, and I think Steve Bruce does too.
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest compliment you can pay him. I think somebody said last night again on the show on Ladies' Night that they hadn't, they'd almost forgotten that Dubravka was injured. So yeah, well done, Darlow. He's certainly grasped the opportunity and hopefully given Steve Bruce something to think about. Joe Linton, look. It's the minimum he should be given his effort, and that's what he's put in. As I say, we're edging towards the 10 games that I gave him, and there's a little bit more there than there has been in the past. So let's see what happens. Let's see how it goes. Always plenty of questions. Want to try and get through as many as we can tonight. So please send your questions in for Liam. He'll do his best to answer them. Craig Southgate, any news on Ashley's court case against the Premier League, and any news of more incomings, Liam?
So yeah, things are ticking over on the takeover sense. I say ticking over in the loosest sense because things are still going on. It's all very secretive. It's all staying very much behind closed doors. But the legal case, there's some suggestions. It's not stopped, but it's not necessarily ridiculously active at the moment. But things are happening with regards to the consortium, and obviously with Ashley. With incomings, I'll stick to the message that's really been put to me, is that it's going to have to be an active final few days of the transfer window if Newcastle United and Steve Bruce want to get the players in that they want to. Steve Bruce said to me last week, he said, I can't keep collecting players, and I get what he means. They can't just keep bringing players in and be stuck in positions where they're paying wages of players who aren't playing for anybody, which is what they've had in previous seasons. I think the idea was to get rid of Yedlin. The idea was to get rid of Atsu. And those deals could well still happen. I've seen reports from America suggesting that Yedlin's here to stay. For Steve Bruce, that could potentially be a disaster in terms of having to keep a third right back at the club. That wasn't part of the plans. He was going to trim him. One problem they've got is this left back role. It might be the case that Yedlin's asked to perform that role, or Manquillo even. It might well be the position Newcastle find themselves in, and he's kept on. Atsu's definitely a player that isn't part of the plans. I've said all along, and here Celtic are interested, but it's wages. Wages are a big issue. He's in the final year of his contract, and he's on decent wage for Scottish Premiership standards. So it'd be really difficult to get them out the door. Henri Saivet is another. Ashraf Lazar, Rolando Aarons. We're talking about players that Newcastle United are desperate to get rid of, but they can't find takers. it's really difficult to find takers for players that nobody really wants.
Yeah.
And these players have floated around this football club not playing games for years now, and they're genuinely damaged goods. There's plenty of other players out there that people, even desperate clubs, would pick up cheaper than what we're offering these players out. And that's not the club's fault. That's just what it is. Ultimately, they give them these contracts, but Newcastle United just can't shift these players. And I think the struggles in the first few weeks of the season have genuinely had an impact on transfer business. I think there's been a little bit of a rethink. I do think there has been some midfield interest. Can't give any names, but there has been some feelers put out there in terms of getting a midfielder in. But also central defender is one that's desperately needed. We've seen a couple of injuries here and there, and all of a sudden Newcastle United are down to bare bones. But ultimately, the one we really wanted is a striker. And at the moment, given the need for strengthening other positions, I think that, if anything, could be the one that falls by the wayside. But there's a lot of time. I know it's only 5-6 days left of this window. A lot happens. We all know that a lot happens in those days. So I could easily see Christian Atsu going out on loan. I could easily see a player coming in his place. Jacob Murphy's still going to be an interesting one, despite Steve Bruce's comments last week. For me, I would like to see him given an opportunity. I don't think he took his opportunity very well at Spurs, but it's hard to judge him on that. And it's equally hard to judge him on that fantastic performance last week. But the thing about the difference between Atsu and Murphy is that with Murphy, there are a lot of takers. There are takers north of the border. There are takers in the Championship. So he would be a player you could trim from the 25-man squad list, which is now sitting at 28, 29 players. He's one you could trim quite easily because there are people who want him. Someone like an Henri Saivet is one that you'd find very difficult to get rid of because nobody genuinely wants him. So it's going to be an interesting few days. I do think Newcastle United will be active. They'll at least be trying. They are. I seen somebody ask me a question on Twitter just before we came on air, saying, "Oh, Newcastle even bothering in the last few days?" Yes, they are. But like I said, the approach is out before in, and I think that's where we still stand.
Okay. Evening, fellas. Should we go for Loftus-Cheek? Chelsea available on loan. He's an athlete compared to Shelvey and Hayden. A lot of talk last night again on Ladies' Night about the midfield issue, and that's Shelvey, Hayden, Hendrick. ASM, of course, was unavailable at the weekend, but, trying to find the right combination, it seems to be an issue at the moment. And, finding the right formation for the team really seems to be, a bit of a problem for Steve Bruce. But, the midfield's a concern because, with the exception of Shelvey, and you've already said at the start of the program there that, he is a bit of an enigma, isn't he? He doesn't, it's no surprise that there's not a great deal of effort from him. It's an issue he's had all the way through his career. But do we need that bit of creativity, coming in? And would Loftus-Cheek be the kind of player you'd like to see?
Loftus-Cheek would be a fantastic signing, and he'll not. There's plenty of clubs interested in players like Ruben Loftus-Cheek. If he can stay fit, he's a fantastic footballer. He's a footballer who can make an impact on the international level, never mind the Premier League. I really rate Ruben Loftus-Cheek. He's also a player that former manager Rafa Benitez was absolutely desperate in the January window when Newcastle United got promoted to bring to the football club. He was a Premier League ready player. Would have had him on loan. He's a player that the scouts are very aware of. Is he a player that I see coming to Newcastle United? I certainly hope so. But I think, like I say, I think it would take some considerable movement out of the squad before we see any kind of considerable movement in. And I think that's a problem. You touch on the midfield. I've been saying it on here since the start of the summer, since we started all this out. I'm not happy with the central midfield. I believe Shelvey and Hayden was pretty much trade Diarmi in and out. Was pretty much the midfield that got Newcastle United promoted in 2016-17. And they've been trying to better it ever since. It's not good enough to play week in, week out in the Premier League and produce results. It just isn't. They need better players in that position. I don't mind John Joe Shelvey sometimes, but he's a passenger a lot of the time. And I can see why forward players like him because he's creative, can be creative. But the way Newcastle are playing at the moment, they need grafters. They can't afford to be carrying footballers through games. And that's where Isaac Hayden stands head and shoulders above John Joe Shelvey for me. And I've said on here before, I think Isaac Hayden, because of the level Newcastle are at the moment, I think Isaac Hayden gets held up on a pedestal. I genuinely don't. Personal opinion, I think he's a good player, but he's no better than what we are. He's an average mid Premier League midfielder. But what he does that Shelvey doesn't is he grafts, he'll tackle, he'll run all day, and that's like people say that's the bare minimum you expect, as you said of Joe Linton. But we don't always get that from Shelvey. And I genuinely think somebody with Hayden, is it Hendrick? I don't think he did himself any favours on Sunday, but let's not judge him too quick. Could it be him potentially? I certainly wouldn't be playing John Joe Shelvey on Saturday.
No, me neither, mate. Colin Wilson's asking if there's any news on Nasser Al-Khelafi's court case. Of course, we never hear anything about this on the media. So, have you any news on it?
No, it's not something that's been widely reported. It has been reported in some places, but it just sounds like it's going to take over for the next few weeks, that one, and then we'll probably find out some kind of result.
Okay, Joe McClellan's asking, is Liam sitting in front of a 3-bar fire? You're quite illuminated tonight.
You know what it is, right? No, right. So last week when I was covering for you, Steve, it got really dark.
Badly, as some people said last night.
It got really dark. It's getting dark now, and the lighting in this bedroom up on the top floor is rubbish. So I've kind of got this like dressing table light behind here. That's what this sort of gloom.
Right, okay. So, I've got you. It's good to say. It looks like you've had some Ready Brek, mate. Do you remember that advert where you used to get the Ready Brek glow? But at least we can see you, mate. Yeah, last night I went off for about 2 seconds. Apparently, I didn't realise, and the girls just continued talking. And of course, there was loads of comments coming in saying, "Yeah, not like Liam, who was like a rabbit in the headlights." Now, last week they were all saying that you did really well, but obviously because you weren't there last night, they had a pop at you. See, so no, you did well last week, mate. Well done. Virgin so far so good over the last couple of weeks, but it was again the next night it went down. Luckily I wasn't doing the show then, but yeah, what a nightmare. James says so we send out Lejeune on loan because we've got a replacement in holding all but ready. That deal then falls through and we just act like we don't need another centre back. Are we getting a centre back, says James?
It's certainly one they've been looking at. But yeah, well, it does seem a little bit of a strange decision to get let Florian Lejeune go. But I would say I've never got the sense. I remember speaking to Steve Bruce at the very start of his reign, and he kept saying that everyone keeps telling me Florian Lejeune's the best of the lot. He was still coming back from injury back then.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's ever been convinced. Since he's seen him, I don't think he's ever been convinced. He was a centre-half himself. I just don't think he thinks Lejeune does the fundamentals right. I think Lejeune's, I've said it on here before, I think without injury, fully fit, Lejeune's got the ability when he plays with somebody big and strong. He could be like a Rolls-Royce defender. He's a lovely, lovely player to watch. I just think injuries have really taken a toll, and I can see why, personally, I can see why Steve Bruce has come to the evaluation that he has. He sees him all the time, and I think it takes him a long time to get up to speed. And the injuries really haven't done him any favours at Newcastle. So I don't actually disagree with allowing someone like Florian Lejeune go. I don't actually disagree with letting Fabian Schär go either, if that was down to me. And I think that could have happened had he not had this injury throughout the window. Because they're not that I don't rate them as footballers. I do. I just think in this 4 at the back, which he's determined to play, I just don't think they fit. I don't think they fit in that side. And I think I would rather bring somebody in who does than have players who are genuinely just going to always be sort of on the bench and fans will be calling for them to come in. And then when they do come in, they don't quite fit. And I think, I think it was poorly planned, but they can't have imagined Kieran Clark would be picking up injuries left, right, and centre. They can't have imagined Paul Dummett would be so far off as he is. And I think they could have done with somebody like that. If they had at least one of those back, then you wouldn't really be worrying about centre half too much. But the situation is at the moment, they desperately need one. But like I said, they need one of those. They need left back cover. I've said it all summer. They ideally need a better right back, although Manquillo has been actually excellent at the start of the season. They need a midfielder and they need another striker. They desperately need another striker. Even if that's not to play with Callum Wilson, if that's to make sure it keeps Callum Wilson honest and pressures him and he can take him in and out, bring somebody else on, change the tack. So yeah, I think they desperately need still 4 or 5 players, but will not be the only club saying this. There's clubs all over the country saying exactly the same kind of things as what we are. God, we need to be active. And I think it's easy to criticise coming in these final days of the window. If Newcastle do nothing now, it's easy to criticise. But I do think they've done good business. They've went out and got players that they desperately needed. They needed one centre forward at least. They need a left back at least, and they went and got 2 of those and spent decent money on them. And I still think players like Ryan Fraser are going to have a big impact on that team when fully fit and fully flying. So I think Newcastle have recruited well, but obviously they could have done more, and hopefully they will.
Just need somebody to be able to coach them now. That would be handy. Nathan Thomas says, Money Mike Ashley says things are progressing nicely. Discuss. In all seriousness, any whispers?
I've already said it tonight. Yeah, things do seem to be ticking along. I'll say one thing. If it were dead, we would have heard by now. So just take fans out there who are constantly on. I get the questions all the time. If it was dead, we would know about it by now, and it isn't dead. Things are still going on. So take some comfort and confidence from that.
Okay, Darren's asking if there's any new information about the 2 coaching staff that left last week. It wasn't coaching staff; it was medical staff, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a physio and somebody else in the medical team, and yeah, I don't know anything about that. I'm sure that'll be something dealt with internally. Potentially, if there's been any kind of wrongdoing or hasn't, or if anybody's been wronged in this process, there'll be internal investigations and probably outward investigations. So I don't know what the situation is on that. We'll just have to wait and see if that one plays out. Realistically, is it significant? No, I don't think if it was significant, it wouldn't be these people wouldn't be let go.
Yeah. Barry Hogan says Bruce has supposedly approached Smalling, doesn't want to come, and Phil Jones, too expensive. Why is he going for these?
Chris Smalling, I think, just been desperate to seal that permanent move to Roma, and who wouldn't? So I don't actually blame him for wanting to try. He's looking in Italy for another couple of years. Phil Jones, I'm glad Newcastle are well clear of that. I'm really pleased that they're not going near that, because I think he's a disaster. I really do. I've thought that ever since he signed with Man United. He's not known whether he's a midfielder or a defender since he was a kid, and I think he's neither.
Okay, Christopher says, I wish viewers would stop asking about the court case and the takeover. If there was something to discuss, it would come out, not holding back for shows. Chris, look, people are interested, mate. It's one of them things. It's human nature. And when Liam comes on, I think out of all the guests that we'll have on, and that's no offence to you, but, Liam does have good contacts in the UK and in Saudi. So, it's probably the one show I expect people to ask one of the guests if they know anything. So, it's no problem for me anyway. Fungo Freddy watched the Yami show this morning. Well done on squeezing out of him what Atwood didn't. Great interview, mate. Thanks very much for that, mate. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as people know watching the channel, I do get other guests on who aren't football related, and we've got Yami B on. Interesting story, hell of a story, really. 40 years in prison. That doesn't tell you the half of it. You want to give that a watch. It's only an hour long, but very, very interesting interview with Yami B. So give that a watch. Stu, good evening, mate. He says, seriously, how do we pick up so many injuries when we play as badly as we do? It's not like John Joe was busting a gut. The injuries thing, I mean, I've just seen Tom as well going on about that as well, just saying, under Rafa we didn't have as many injuries, but we seem to be getting injuries galore under Bruce. I mean, it's, it was the soft tissue injuries, wasn't it, that we were suffering last season? Does seem to come with Steve Bruce when he coaches or manages, doesn't it? For some reason, it's happened at so many other clubs.
Yeah, it's something that other journalists have documented, that these kind of things are quite regular occurrence under Steve Bruce. It's not something I have a particular knowledge of, having only really come across him in this job. But I think the stories have come out from the likes of Hull, they've come out from Aston Villa, they've come out from Sunderland, going back even 10 years. Is it something wrong with Steve Bruce's coaching technique? I don't know. We've seen last season he took a lot of risks on players when he probably shouldn't have. We've seen Alan St-Maximin at the start of the season, probably took a risk on him at Tottenham, got injured, was out a while, never really recovered till after lockdown. We've seen other players have been thrown in and struggled and stayed out injured. I think we're sort of seeing this season a little bit more of a cautious Steve Bruce, particularly with the approach towards Ryan Fraser and others, that he just doesn't seem to want to throw them in. Which can be a good thing, but a frustrating thing, equally the same. But I think it's better to be cautious Benitez, I can talk in depth about Benitez because Benitez, his approach to injury management was like no other manager I've ever seen before. He had particular people monitoring the performance of players daily. He could see when levels were dropping. He had people analysing these levels, and he could see when players were more likely, they were running on empty or whatever, and they're more likely to pick up injuries. And I've said this, I think, on here before, that Benitez never, he wasn't the type of manager who would just say, oh, he had good 20 minutes on Saturday. Do you know what? I'm going to throw him in next week. That wasn't how he planned things. He was very meticulous in the way that he selected his teams. And a lot of it was to do with performances in terms of fitness, strength, the levels that were shown. They may well have peaked on a Tuesday and he could see a steady decline on a Wednesday, Thursday. By the Friday, he knew that player, even if he was a key player, was in more of a chance of getting an injury and putting himself out for a month rather than a game, that he would just take that player out, replace him, give him 20 minutes instead. It was very meticulous, and it was something I'd not really seen much from managers before, ones I'd dealt with, and was very impressed by it. Whether Steve Bruce has that same kind of meticulous approach, I can't. He's never gone into depth with regards to that, but I would say using his last season's want to risk players and throw them in even though they weren't fit, I would be very surprised if he was as meticulous with regards to injuries. So yeah, I think he does have to be culpable in a sense, but I have seen a little change in him this season. And again, I'll think towards Ryan Fraser. He knows he's a player that hasn't really played a lot of football this calendar year, and I think he's reluctant to really watch them in. I would have probably went with it on Sunday, but I'm not a football manager and I'm not paid anywhere near their wages to make these kind of decisions. Neither are most of us out there. So it was actually quite positive in a way to see him maybe change tack from what he was showing last season.
I mean, just before I come to Mark's question, Josh Blakey put something out on Twitter tonight. It was 29 games since Boxing Day, 9 wins, 4 against lower league opposition, and 5 wins in the Premier League, 2 of those against 10 men. It's quite damning statistics, that, by Steve Bruce.
Yeah, it's horrific, but we've lived it. We know it. It's been not only has it been poor in terms of results, it's been absolutely horrific in terms of performances as well. I think you can probably only think you can count on one hand. Steve Bruce has probably had 41, 42 games of the Premier League, 10 in the Cup on top of that as well, with the run they had last year and this year. And I could probably only think, I'm saying one hand, I could probably count on 2 or 3 fingers the amount of performances you'd look at and say, you know, that was done well today. A lot of those games where I've picked up points and results have been turgid performances. I think back to like January and drawing at home with Oxford in the Cup, beating Chelsea in the last minute. Yes, that was actually one of the magical moments of the season. That outpouring of frustration and joy with that Isaac Hayden goal. But it was shocking. It was absolute rubbish. We've had some hammerings. We've been hammered off Leicester a couple of times, hammered off probably 3 or 4 other sides. It's been rubbish. It has been genuinely rubbish. And I think anybody who's standing by Steve Bruce in terms of, not Steve Bruce the man, I'm going to be very particular what I say because I do have to deal with the man myself. But if anybody's going to stand by the performance that his team have put in during his time here, they're not watching what we're watching. They're just purely looking at the stats, which and not the stats like what have been picked out by that person on Twitter. They're looking at the stats whereby the inexplicable ones. When Newcastle United have had 3 games in the Premier League, they've barely kicked a ball in 2 of those, and they're sitting with 4 points in 10. How do you explain that to anybody? Most people from the outside looking in will say, well, he's doing all right, isn't he? They're doing all right. They're could be in the quarterfinal of the Cup by the end of the week, and they might have 7 points, and it's been rubbish. Like, you've got, unless you're watching Newcastle, I don't think you understand. And I think a lot of people are quite baffled by Newcastle United fans' anger outside of our bubble, because they look at it and say, well, you finished 13th last season. You were never in relegation trouble. But it was shocking. It was absolute rubbish. And this season, already 3-5 games in all competitions, is looking very, very similar. We've had good luck with the cup draws. It's going on that narrative again. we're getting results where we shouldn't. We don't deserve to get results, and we're doing all right, and we're in the middle of the table. What we're complaining about, that's what people outside of our bubble are asking, and they're obviously just not seeing Newcastle United, because it has been terrible. I mean, there are very few performances, very few teams in the Premier League this season will put in 2 performances like the Brighton game and then Tottenham and not get relegated out of the Premier League this season. And I don't think Newcastle United will get relegated this season. I think they've got enough quality in certain positions, and there are enough teams out there. Not every team you come across is going to be as tactically astute as a Brighton. Brighton's tactical nous of their manager far exceeds some in the top 6, even someone like a Solskjaer at Manchester United or somebody like that. You know what I mean? You're not always going to come across those games. And I think Newcastle will pick up enough points from having a quality goal scorer, and Alan St. Maximin and Miguel Almiron, and even a John Joe Shelby might win you the odd game. They'll have enough in these games to just pick up enough points and be safe. And probably people at the end of the season, if Steve Bruce is still here and we're still in the Premier League, they'll be asking the same questions. They'll all be going, well, what are you complaining about? You finished 13th again or 14th or whatever. You were never in relegation trouble. But yeah, you never seen what we've seen. You're not living it. It is dreadful.
Yeah. I mean, it's right, and fans aren't blind; they can see it, and that's the problem. Mad Mag Mark says, "Do you think Newcastle will be interested in bringing Victor Moses on loan from Chelsea as a right winger option, since he's not part of Frank Lampard's setup?"
I would say going into these final days is a right wing back probably at the top of the list of players that you want to sign. I would argue not, because it's a position that Ryan Fraser has played, to be honest. Would you really bring somebody else in that role if you really wanted to play a right wing back? Javier Manquillo's proven he's decent in that role as well. Ideally, in an ideal world, as I've said, you'd want to bring a right back in if you had unlimited funds and unlimited amount of spaces, but they haven't, and they need a defender, they need a midfielder, and they need a striker, and they probably need a left back. So I would say in the list of positions that you want to sign players, a right back, although Victor Moses is a good player, and I would have him at Newcastle United, of course. But would I be prioritising that? I think he'd probably be 5th on the list in terms of positions that need strengthening. Okay,
Al Matthews says, "Evening lads, Liam, what's the latest on this Peru lad?"
I tweeted something out today. It seems like it's a deal that's going to get done. Reports in Peru suggest, and it could even be tomorrow, that the player begins his transition over to the UK. Obviously, coming out from outside the UK, we'll have to quarantine for a little while, but that'll be a deal that's done before the end of the window. And who knows? He's an unknown. We've done this before. The last high-profile unknown type player that we signed in that sense was an Jose Perez, and we've seen how well he performed, but there are plenty others in and around the fringes who don't do anywhere near as well. So fingers crossed the lad. Sort of listening to people who know his game over there, and his brother's been talking, president of the club they're buying him from has been talking, and he doesn't sound as though he's a player that's Premier League ready. Doesn't sound like he's a player that's English football ready, to be honest. But it could be one of those that they've looked at, they're going to take a risk on, and I think it sounds like they're probably going to take him in, play him with the 23s until January, and then probably look to send him out on loan to the continent. Probably somewhere like Belgium, Holland, potentially even Germany, somewhere like that, lower down, and just get the lad ready for European football, at least, because I'm led to believe he's quite a slight playmaker. Can play wide, but also mainly a number 10, links the play and likes to beat the man. And we've seen he might just need a little bit of toughening up. I think plenty of people out there will probably have seen the YouTube videos I have as well. And he does look a very slight lad. I think they want to beef him up a little bit before throwing him in with the Premier League Wolves.
Yeah, okay. Just a big thank you again to Darren Baldwin Funerals, local independent family business, 24-hour service for all your funeral needs. And big shout out to QTech as well, .co.uk, who do pool tables and snooker tables, both sponsoring us this month. Big thanks to you, lads. And just to let you know, some emails I've received today about the NUFC Matters Christmas night out. Friday the 4th of December, 7 o'clock at the Tyneside Irish Centre in aid of Newcastle Food Bank. I will be hosting it. We'll have a live Q&A with one of our regular people on the show, Lee Clark. Liam is going to be there along with a lot of the other presenters that you see on the show, a lot of the other supporters. We're going to have a raffle auction and basically just try and raise a few quid for the food bank. Obviously, this is COVID dependent, of course, but tickets are £12. If you want to buy some tickets for that, get yourself onto www.newcastlelegends.com and 80 tickets. That's what we're doing. We've still got to go with the COVID numbers. There'll only be 80 tickets available. So the couple already, they only went online at 6 o'clock. But as I say, proceeds going to Newcastle Food Bank, and be nice to have a bit of a get together. So if you're living in Newcastle or the surrounding areas, and you want to come along and meet everybody who gets involved with these shows and who's brought you a bit of entertainment over the COVID era, then please come along. It'll be nice to meet up with you and see you. Loads of questions coming in tonight. We might go into a little bit of extra time if Liam's got the time. I know he was busy before we came on, but James is again asking, we're going to get a centre back on loan then since the Holden deal fell through. I mean, it is something that they're still looking for. They are still looking for a centre-back. Liam did mention that earlier. Whether they get one is a different matter. I know Adam Beckett, who's running for the Supporters Trust, was asking, are loans still an option? Is that something that we're, still looking at? Maybe, going for a couple of loan players. And, do you think it's more likely going to be loans rather than permanent buys?
Yeah, look, in the final few days of this window, if Steve Bruce has an ideal world, what he would like to do is he'd like to sign a striker and he'd also like to sign a defender in an ideal world. That was where we stood around a week ago, I know for a fact. Like I said, I think things may have changed. There have been feelers put out for midfielders, but I think in an ideal world, another striker and a defender would be where Steve Bruce what he wants to bring in. The budget, as we know, has pretty much been spent on the two major buys that we've brought in this summer. And I think the loan market is primarily where Newcastle United are looking. The loan market is primarily where most clubs in the Premier League are now looking. I think it's been an interesting window in that sense that a lot more clubs are looking for players on loan with options to buy, on loan with obligatory purchase options. They're also looking for free transfers. I think there has been a change. Payment installments seems to be something that seems to be on the increase as well, where teams sort of pay a small amount in front. I think even the top sides are doing that. You look at someone like Thiago at Liverpool. Bayern Munich took a small down payment for that footballer, one of the best footballers, one of the best midfielders in his position on the planet. A club like Bayern Munich took a small down payment. And I think that's reflective of the market. That's reflective of the kind of money that's floating around. I don't envisage any cash buys, and I'd be surprised if there's any major cash buys in the Premier League unless we see some teams panicking, or we could have seen some maybe have kept their powder dry, knowing that fees have remained relatively high throughout this window despite the financial implications of COVID running around in the background. So as to go back to that question, in an ideal world, Steve Bruce would probably bring two players in on loan, but much of that is dependent on getting rid of a DeAndre Yedlin. Again, that's a difficult situation with the left-back problem they've got, and also getting rid of Christian Atsu, Henri Saivet, Rolando Aarons and Ashraf Lazar less so, but there does need to be a trimming of the squad. Dan Barlaser could be somebody else who was given away in the final days of the window, as well as, like I said, Jacob Murphy has still got a big question mark over his head. I would give him a chance, but the conundrum with Jacob Murphy, as mentioned earlier in the show, is that there will be people who want to take Jacob Murphy. Rangers were interested. We've seen Sheffield Wednesday would happily take him back. Other clubs in and around the mid section of that division would happily take him back at their football club. And I think it could come down to that. If you're desperate to bring a player in and you need to trim, it could be who can I sort of drop off this squad to give me that room, and that's where I'm not 100% with Jacob Murphy. It could be one that he maybe falls by the wayside in the later days of this window because of that.
Quick one on Nathan's point there. Super agent John Smith alluded to the fact that the Football League were talking to a foreign investment fund, PIF, about bailout money and support through COVID. Anything to say on that?
Yeah, I did hear the same interview on Talksport, and it did raise some questions in my head. I don't. You could take it one of two ways. I don't know for a fact if this is true. So I can't say for definite. I can't give you a yes or no on this, but it did raise two questions. So this could either be seen as a positive in a Newcastle United takeover sense, and the positive being that this would be done as a bit of a trade-off. We'll help you out if you push us through. Now, I think there are caveats with that. I mean, do the PIF really want to turn a £200 million deal to buy Newcastle United into a much larger bailout of football league clubs, and that would cost? It would be a very, very costly decision. I'm not so sure on that matter, but it could be. It could easily be, or this could simply be seen as what way could the PIF exert their sporting influence that they want? And there's been talk of sports washing. How could they have the biggest impact on English football? And it could well be that dropping the idea of Newcastle United and riding in on a white horse as a white knight to save the English game could be the biggest impact that they have without having to buy a football club. Now, I don't know if either of those are true. I know for a fact they are still interested, but it does raise that question with you, because we don't, unless we're part of this deal, we don't really know exactly what is going on behind closed doors in negotiations. So I do think it raises questions. That's my opinion, but I can't give you a definitive answer on whether it's actually happening. We've seen lots of throwaway comments like this before, and have proved to have absolutely no truth in them. So we'll wait and see on that one.
Okay, mate. And I read Barlaser has had a medical at Rotherham today. Has he gone? Asks Simon Davies.
I don't know if he's gone, but it wouldn't surprise us. Rotherham willing to pay decent money for him, and they desperately want him. They've been really relying upon him, and they haven't signed any other players in that position. They really wanted him in, and I think Bruce has given him a little opportunity to prove himself, and I don't think he's done badly, but he's another player that because of his age, he's a late developer. It's probably going to count against him, because whereas he might have been kept on in the under-21 status, because he's 23, he falls into the Premier League 25 man, and there just isn't really a place for him, unfortunately.
Okay, and John Brewis, good evening, lads. What do you think of the news saying that the government is demanding the Premier League to bail out EFL? I think if they'd accepted the PIF bid, the added funding would have helped out. Yeah, a lot of talk about this today. It was across the news channels, BBC, ITV, Sky, about league clubs, EFL clubs, the lower league clubs like Sunderland, and whether they would be able to help bail them out at some point. Would the Premier League be doing it? Would there anybody be helping them? Because a lot of these clubs, I think there was 10 in particular, could seriously face going out of business if we end up through a Christmas and early part of next year into April, May time. Some of these clubs might not survive.
Look, I think there's enough food at the table for everyone to eat in football, and I don't disagree with the government taking that stance. We've seen clubs like Newcastle United, who spent 35 million in transfer fees this summer, exploit the government furlough scheme to the very end that it possibly could have, and that to me is not the right approach. We're seeing other clubs spending significant fees, 200 million in Chelsea's sense. You can't tell me that there isn't any kind of money there to help to sort of help the clubs below them. There should be. I don't think it's a position for the government should be having to bail these clubs out. I just don't think it's something that public money should be spent on. Not when public money was spent unfairly on keeping people in jobs, which I agree with. For people who could afford it, who could have afforded to keep people in jobs themselves, rich owners like Mike Ashley and others. Tottenham Hotspur try to take the furlough. Liverpool try to take the furlough. These are clubs spending big sums of money. It doesn't cost these kind of transfer fees to keep people in jobs, and it certainly won't cost that to keep people in jobs at lower league football clubs as well. It has to keep going round. The Football League has to have clubs, and I think 10 probably, given the current financial status of some, is probably a very unreasonable estimate. I think there'll be a lot more. I think there'll be a lot more clubs really be very close to hitting the wall if this continues, beyond the winter, which, to be honest, it looks like doing. I think it would be a surprise if we're not having conversations quite soon about another call off of football at all levels. I would be very surprised if that's not just around the corner. So I think it's fair to say that these discussions should go on, but I fully stand by the call of the government to say, well, how can you go out and spend 35 million on transfer fees, and we've been paying your academy staff to keep their jobs on till October? Not right, is it? It's not right. It's exploitation of public money. And I think it's fair for the government to say, right, well, you exploited us now, then you're going to have to bail yourselves out now. I honestly stand by that. I think it's been, I think that they're fair in their comment in that sense.
Yeah, I would agree with you, mate, 100%. Tom's question there about Rudiger, is that a possibility, do you think? I mean, I think I can't see that happening, if I'm honest.
No, I think he's going to... he was linked with Barcelona a day and a half ago, so I don't think he's coming to Newcastle United.
Yeah, Jason Carter says the words he'll remember so far from 2020 are COVID and takeover. Nathan Watson says, what do you think of the player we've offered 250,000 for? He looked like he had a good trial. What do you think of him? Obviously, we mentioned him a little bit earlier. It must be the Peruvian he's talking about, I think.
Yeah. There's been no trial, but and the fee is significantly less than that, I'm led to believe as well. So yeah, he looks good on YouTube, but we'll reserve our judgment on that. We've seen plenty of YouTube players before, so we'll see. But they have got a plan in place for him, and he is a player that I do expect to turn up at Newcastle United before the end of the window.
Antonson asking what you make of Bruce's comments today about Sunday's game. The more I listen to him, the more I want him to go. Still saying he has to be patient, but surely had enough time. Yeah, he's not the greatest on camera. Like he doesn't instill confidence in front of the supporters, and he says some crazy things at times, like Steve Bruce, but it doesn't instill confidence in the fans, does it?
No, it doesn't. There's always so many mixed messages that come out, and I don't like the way that he's kind of deflecting the blame from himself onto other people a little bit in his last couple of press conferences. I thought he did quite well to hold his hands up and say, I got it all wrong last week. Hold your hands up against it. You got it all wrong at Tottenham because you did. You got it all wrong. And surely you can see that they should be able to do that. Some are saying he did do that a little bit today. I still think there's a little bit of deflection of blame. And I think he needs to... It's, you know what I'm saying, that it's all right in putting his hands up and saying, "No, I couldn't do this." But has he got it in his locker to change this? Has he got it in his locker? I want to see him prove that. I said that at the start of the season, that there is a pressure on Bruce this season, that he's had a lot of money, not all of it spent by him, but there's been a lot of money invested in Newcastle United's squad in the last 12 to 18 months under him. A lot invested in the forward areas, and Newcastle United are no further forward than they were this time last year in an attacking sense. You could easily argue, despite having better players in the forward areas, they're worse. They're worse than they were this time last season, and that takes some doing. That's pretty bad. That they've gone from a side who weren't great to being probably the worst, easily the worst in the Premier League in terms of creating chances, in terms of not taking chances, they're 100%, but getting those chances. And I feel really sorry for players like Callum Wilson. I don't think he bought into this. I think he's been convinced largely, he talked about in his early interviews, he's largely been convinced by that game he watched from the stands where Newcastle absolutely tore Bournemouth to bits, created chances galore. But I don't know if he did much more homework beyond that, because that was a one-off, an absolute one-off. And we've not been anything like it since. But Bruce needs to, I said at the start of the season, he needs to put his mark on this team. He's talked about being more attacking, and I don't think it takes a lot of tweaks in that team to make it more attacking. They could, if they'd gone at Spurs on Sunday rather than just surrendered like they did in the first half for that silly formation, I think they were there for the take. And I think you could have done things against Brighton, particularly when they got a little bit of a foothold in the second half. Go for it a bit. I don't think it's just about changing personnel. It's got to be a system. It's got to be an idea, and there doesn't seem to be any plan behind this. There obviously is, but to watching it from the outside in, there's so many switches in formation, so many switches in personnel. There doesn't seem to be a clear idea on what's going on here and what direction, what identity Newcastle United are going to play with. And it wouldn't surprise us if we now, because if results don't come Newcastle's way, we'll see some reverting back to this 5 at the back, because it worked under Rafa Benitez and for probably 6 or 7 games last season. But I don't want to see you do that, Steve Bruce. I want to see you put your mark on this team. If that mark's not good enough, then fair enough. But be your own man. Pick your team and make it play the way you surely, having spent so long in the game, you can coax that out of players to play the way you want them to play. You've been dealing with them for a year. Surely they're listening by now.
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating, and you can see it in the comments. Like big thanks to Diane Byrne for taking a membership out and being the first person to buy 2 tickets for the Christmas do, and a big thank you to Mark Garfoot as well. He's bought a couple of tickets. Looking forward to seeing the faces, putting names to faces of people is always interesting when you have when you haven't got a clue what people look like. So it is good. Aaron Hunter says. Yeah, go on. Aaron Hunter says, I'm so sick of Bruce's back 5 tactics. Just catching up on what you've said, really, mate. It's so depressing. I'd like to see back 3 in attacking football, even if we get beat. But I don't think we'll ever see anything like this. Bill Smith, he says, our coaching methods must be so outdated considering the injuries we've suffered this season and last season. What has changed? Mefenemo says, feel when we have the ball, there's a massive disjoint between midfield and attack with the ball. I'd like us to try and sign a midfielder who can link the midfield and attack, because I don't think that's Almiron. Interesting to hear as well that Man United have had the £91.3 million offer for Sancho turned down. What is football coming to when that kind of money is getting bandied around, and even that's not enough for a footballer? Crazy, really. And those days have got to be, on the way out, I think, if COVID continues.
Yeah, you can only imagine that the well will eventually run dry with the Premier League, because we're going to see depressed sponsorship, we're going to see depressed TV deals, we're going to see obviously depressed commercial revenue with football clubs, and even though those depressions in terms of TV and particularly commercial revenues will have a big impact on teams further down the food chain with regards to Football League, National League and lower, I do think it's going to have an impact on the Premier League. And it is going to be a case that the teams that will survive best will be the ones with owners who are willing to put money in. Obviously, some owners will have seen their private enterprises hit. The money won't be flowing as freely to them in their personal life, so they may be less willing to spend. But it's going to be people with deep pockets, and it's going to be people who manage the crisis best. And I think Newcastle United, the way they've been run, struggle. They're a good financial ship in that sense, but they'll struggle with the commercial side because it's not really an area that they're particularly strong in. So yeah, I think it is criminal. And like I've said before, if Man United can spend, who are willing to spend 91 million, even if that's not all up front, 91 million on a footballer, they can probably keep the lights on at 2 or 3 clubs in League Two quite comfortably without even worrying about that cash leaving the football club.
Yeah. Do you feel there's a chance of Jethro Willems coming back, says Tim?
It's conversations that I'm actually off this week, but it is with transfers and being a journalist, and these things you never switch off. And it is something that there's a couple of conversations I've had today with regards Jethro Willems. I think it's less likely than likely, simply because he's not ready to play. He's back in training. It was a big injury and will take some considerable recovery still from now. But it could get desperate if it's a player they want to bring in. He is a player that Steve Bruce is a fan of. It's a player that would happily come back. But I think another couple of clubs are looking at him. We're seeing just West Ham were one that have taken a little look at Jethro Willems. There are others, but it is a risk bringing Jethro Willems in because he's not ready to walk into a side. He's not ready to play. And I think it might be a push to see Newcastle United sign the player. If he doesn't go anywhere and nobody signs him and still available in January, I would definitely be talking very differently. He could be a player that Newcastle United really go for because, like I say, he's got a lot of fans at St James's Park, not just on the terraces. He's got a lot of fans behind the scenes as well.
Richard Keys making his mouth go again this time about BN Sports putting on the Premier League to get changes to VAR. What did you make of that? It was a bit strange, but it's typical Keys.
Yeah, it's it's very difficult to judge Richard Keys when you look at his words sometimes. Is he a very clever man and says things very deliberately, or does he continue to just drop his, just keep dropping his foot in it constantly? I'm not even sure. I'm not sure what he is. I think he's just alone to himself. Very strange comments. That shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. And it does open the question is what other pressure being put on the Premier League. And I think we all know from the letters that were sent out, there were letters sent out to the 20 Premier League clubs, copied in with the Premier League Chief Exec Richard Masters, and those could prove in the legal battle, let's not get too legal, but could potentially prove really crucial in this case that Mike Ashley and Newcastle United and the consortium might well be building behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's going wild on Twitter with Richard Keys' video. Man, he's put a couple of COVID pounds on. I weighed myself for the first time at the weekend. I've lost 1 stone and 2 pounds over. It's
not just that. Was it the beard that took quite?
The beard probably made us look bigger. Yeah, but I mean, I didn't expect to lose I didn't need to lose 1 stone and 2 pounds either. But I'm 14.5 stone, and I've never even been anywhere near 14 stone since I was 18. So that is mental. But yeah, Richard Keys has obviously gained my pound and the rest. Colour Code says, will Fraser slot into the first team when he hits full fitness? I mean, you'd expect he would do because he's a Bruce signing.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he's one of the best 11 players at this football club. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that he plays in the side when he's fit.
Yeah. Frankie, thank you very much, mate. He says, great show again tonight, lads. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It's always a pleasure to have Liam on. And you heard the man himself. He's actually on his holidays, and he's made time. He's took the wrath of his last to come on and do a little bit on NUFC matters. Little Musgrave says, while I agree the VAR needs changing, there's no way TV companies should be getting involved in the process. It was ludicrous at the weekend, and I called it before the Spurs game that there would be some controversy, and luckily it was our way. But what, this handball rule? I mean, why did they make something so easy, so difficult?
I've looked a little bit into this, and I think it's actually quite fair. I'm going to be controversial here. I think it's quite fair. So we're talking about Eric Dyer, who's going up for a header. I don't care whether he's looking forward or backwards. He's got his arm, which is what the new rule is. He's got his arm above shoulder height. There's no way, shape or form that a defender defending a ball needs to have his arm up here, above his head, above his shoulders. And if you're going to flail your arms around like that and it hits your arm, then I don't disagree with that it probably should be a penalty. So I think there are controversies with this, but I don't necessarily buy into the idea that it was a stonewall non-penalty, as Jamie Carragher was screeching on about during the game, after it, changing his Twitter profile photo to it and everything else that went along with it. Yeah, I didn't agree with that. I don't think it was a controversial decision, but that's just my opinion. Would I say the same if it happened against Newcastle? Yes, I would. I don't think, if you're a defender, be clever, be smart. I would be asking, why have you got your arm up there? I don't care where you've come from, whether you're on the descent or whatever. Just be clever with your arms. And I think defenders, it's going to be a tough season for them because they're going to have to really get smart to that. But it's fair to say if it hits your arm in the box, it doesn't have to be deliberate. There's nothing deliberate or indeliberate in the rules written into that. So yeah, I think it's something that is going to cause controversy. But I think that, to me, that Eric Dyer decision was quite clear cut. I didn't see it as a non-penalty, and I think applying the rules strictly, it was quite obvious the way that it played out with the VAR decision. The referee and the video team checking were also quite clear on that, even though it took a little while. They wanted to make sure they got it right. But as soon as they started checking the offside, they knew straight away that it was something they had to give. Yeah.
Stephen Warburton's just asking about Rondon. He put another tweet out, more or less saying, come and get us.
Well, I wish that Newcastle United would go out and get him, because he was a fantastic footballer for Newcastle United. Talks about wearing the number 9. He was a worthy wearer of the number 9. We've seen Joe Linton criticised for having that number on his back, but give it back to Rondon. he'd come back here and score goals galore. It'd be fantastic to see somebody as mobile and quick as Callum Wilson playing alongside Rondon, who was less mobile and quick, but a fantastic hold-up man. Be a fantastic foil for somebody like Callum Wilson, but it's pie in the sky stuff. It ain't going to happen. I'd be very, very surprised if a deal of that magnitude came through. I think the only time we could speculate of a Rondon return probably would be if we've seen a Rafa Benitez return. And that would really have to have a takeover and then some negotiation and considerable money changing hands to see him ever come back to Tyneside in the near future.
Yep. Diane saying, what about Ryan Brewster?
Looks like that could end up being a loan deal, but I suspect somebody might bite on the fee that Liverpool want. I don't know what that fee is. It's considerably more than Newcastle United would be willing to pay in the final days of the window, because, like I say, it's loan deals that Newcastle United are looking at. If Ryan Brewster was available on loan, I think you'd probably find 10 or 12 of the Premier League clubs would be interested in taking him off Liverpool's hands. So I think it'd be a hard one for Newcastle United to secure, but would be absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. The style, the hunger, and the ability. I think it'd be a fantastic signing for Newcastle. Wouldn't light things up in terms of excitement among supporters, because I know that the stigma that comes with warming other clubs' players up for better performances elsewhere. But let's be realistic about where Newcastle United are. That's kind of the market we're in. We're not what we were. We're not where we want to be. We are where we are, and that's the deal that would really improve Newcastle United's 11 and squad. Michael
Hurst asking, who do you think the first manager will be to lose his job this season?
That's a big question, isn't
it? It is, isn't it?
It is a big question.
Moyes for me. Moyes has got to be up there.
Flighty club, West Ham, aren't they? You could see them. Yeah. You could see them quite easily just chopping Moyes if things
Scott
got a bit
Parker took Fulham down before. I think he's got to be a front runner.
Well liked. Done a really, really good job, to be fair, last season in getting them straight back up. But you'd say his head's going to be on the chopping block, isn't it, if things continue to go in the nature that they do.
Bilic has been sacked a couple of times, hasn't he, in this position?
Yeah, Bilic is the other one. He's potentially one that I would go for, because I think they've got some real positives about them, West Brom. I don't think they're as bad as say Norwich last season or whatever, but I think the time will come. It's always around this time of year. It'll be a bit later this time. It's normally in November time, October, when the panic sets in. It might be closer to Christmas this time, but I'm going to go with Bilic. I think there might be a bit of a panic there.
Yeah. Opinions on the Marnie elbow yesterday?
I've only seen it the once, and I've not seen it in context of the game, so it's difficult to make a decision on. But the small segment that I've seen, it looks a little bit naughty.
It did look a bit naughty, It did look a bit naughty.
It looks like a red card.
Yeah, it might be. I don't know whether there'll be retrospective action on that. Marks is my mate's son, Nathan Carolyn, has been pushed and given a chance in the under-23. Scored from the halfway line last week. Fingers crossed for the lad. Yes. Yeah,
I seen that. It was a absolutely fantastic goal. Scored from within his own half, and I seen again that he was trusted with a place in the 23 side. So yeah, good luck to the lad. Jason's asking any news in Milik. We seem to be getting asked this, quite a bit on the show. But I've never really asked the question until you came on. Any news in that? No, I'd be very, very surprised. He's a player well out of Newcastle United category in terms of what they're going to afford. And even if it were a loan deal, there's a lot bigger clubs in terms of stature at the moment, standing Champions League clubs who would take Milik in a heartbeat. So again, you can't rule anything out. But I'd be shocked if that came off. Yeah, Scott Parker looked and sounded like a broken man, says Little Musgrave. Yeah, he does. Luke Smith is telling us to grow up and move on from the takeover. Don't know why we're still so obsessed. Thanks, Luke, for your advice. I'm losing weight, mate. I don't want to grow anymore. And Onom says Milik's about 25 million. I heard Napoli rejected 25 million from Newcastle before they accepted an offer from Roma. I can't imagine that price would have changed much for Milik. Thanks, as always, guys, for your input. Always great to have so many questions and stuff. And I know, Liam does his best to answer that. If you want to give a little plug now, mate, to where people can find out where you Yeah, guys, just make sure you head over to my Twitter page. Really, I normally put it in the little bio down there, but I haven't today. It's at Liam J Kennedy 23. Journalism costs. I've got a little message on there that things are changing in the journalism industry. Things really are. It's not all free anymore, and that's probably the way it should be. I know it's not going to be, people don't like paying for things if they've always had it for free, but so we work a subscription system. If you kind of like what I say on here, you like the things that I write, I've written a lot of stuff regards Takeover, a lot of other things, championing the fans, championing Newcastle United Football Club, because it's a club that is in my heart and means a lot to me, as well as covering it in a professional sense. But if you like that kind of thing that I do, please, honestly, help us out and buy a subscription. It's cheap. It doesn't cost the earth. Costs just as it costs. It's less than your paper you would have been picking up on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday morning. So yeah, just if you can support the work that I do, because without that kind of support, I couldn't come on here. I couldn't chat away with Steve. I couldn't be coming to the events like at Christmas, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. And it'd be really good to meet some people out there who maybe have put their hands in their pockets to not only help this YouTube channel, but also help papers like the Shields Gazette and myself stay in work. So yeah, here we are. Yeah, it'd be fantastic. It'd be good to meet you out there. And like I say, journalism costs. Please, if you can, I know it's difficult times, but if you can, please subscribe.
Yeah, some great comments coming in. Thanks, as always. Damien Pierce, yes, I did disappear for about 10 seconds there and into the ethos, but Liam, he's learned now, you see, carries on. That was me.
As soon as I thought, I'm going to go now. What's my face look like?
That was me jinxing it before, saying I've had no problem with Virgin. Absolute classic. Tomorrow night, anyway, as always, on a Wednesday, I've got Supermac. It's going to be early, though, because we've got an early kickoff when we play Newport. But tomorrow night, I'll be joined by Gibbo and Supermac at the earlier time of 4 o'clock. And then a quick break, and then back on for Match Day Live. We'll be covering the match on the channel, as we have done for the last few games. People seem to be enjoying it. So I'll be back with a panel of Newcastle United fans to take us through, hopefully, into the quarterfinals. And, of course, let's hope, Liam, that we'll have the same result as we did back in 1947 when Len Shackleton got 6 goals in a 13-0 win down at Newport County. Now, how good would that be?
Certainly would. We got 7 last time out, 13 this time. Who knows? No, I think it's going to be a much tougher challenge than it was last week. Giant killers in a lot of senses in the last few years, Newport County. So yeah, I think they'll be bang up for this, and it's a difficult ground to go to. Rodney Parade. We've seen teams like Leeds United, Middlesbrough, Tottenham, and all that Leicester in the last few years really struggle at that football ground. I was speaking to one of their players. I'll not give too much away for an exclusive line in the morning. A player that I know really well, Patrick Hammond, and he did describe. He said it was going to be a culture shock for the Newcastle United players when they walk into what is the dressing room that's been erected in the car park for them tomorrow night. So I think it's going to be a big shock from the luxury of the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday to a little marquee that's been erected in the back of the stand in the car park at Rodney Parade tomorrow night.
Fantastic, mate. Liam Kennedy, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on, and look forward to catching up with you again next week. Until then, take care. Good night, mate.
Cheers.